Hello, everyone. My name is Sahayatha, and I'll be moderating today's session. So I'm incredibly proud and grateful to be working so closely with Sahayatha on this project. But before we go ahead and get started, I would like to give a bit of background on Sahayatha and how we came to establish this Mind Matters series. So in India, Sahayatha actually coordinates to provide care in areas of health, education, and childcare in underserved communities. And currently, Sahayatha has a project focused on educating about 1,400 students from kindergarten to graduate school in India. And they've also taken plenty of initiative during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, in terms of this seminar, Sahayatha has done seminars for mental and emotional health for the past 3 years. However, now we're bringing it home as we feel it's necessary due to COVID-19 and current events. Mental health is not something that's necessarily spoken of at the dining table, but we definitely feel like it should be, and we want to go ahead and open up the conversation and ensure that our community has resources and knows how to use them. We also wish to provide a safe space to talk and learn. Throughout the sessions, we'll speak in both English and Punjabi. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to unmute, chat, or raise your hand for any clarification. Now, before we begin, we would like to ask a quick poll that would aid our guest speakers in their informational sessions. Could you all please provide your gender and age, as well as what interested you to come to this session? And while you do that, I would like to introduce our guest speakers today. So we'll have a total of 3 guest speakers. And first, we'll have Dr. Harry Sekhon. We'll be beginning the presentation by speaking on matters of how to recognize when someone needs help, emotional health, and how varying age groups address emotional and mental well-being. Dr. Sekhon practices at Sacramento Neuropsych Associates, and he's board certified through the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. His quote in practice is that it's easier to build a child than to repair an adult. And he also has a fellowship trained in child and adolescent psychiatry. Dr. Sekhon approaches treatment through a multidimensional lens in which he considers factors such as genetic predispositions, environmental hardships, stressors, and developmental experiences. He has professional affiliations with Sutter Health Systems and Dignity Health. And through his time in medicine, he's also performed and presented research on the effects of ADHD stimulants on the brain of young adults. So now, if you want to go ahead and take the presentation away and begin with your segment, Dr. Sekhon.
Thanks so much, Naika, for the kind introduction. And, thanks to everyone who dialed in. This is so heartening to see that our younger generation is taking initiative to educate and spread the word and kind of slowly eradicate the stigma that mental health carries and kind of burdens the society with. And I think it has to start at the grassroots level with the generations as they kind of come up. So kudos to you guys, and also thanks to Sahayatha for continuing to do efforts at the grassroots level with education and mental health access, in addition to all the wonderful things that they do. As part of what I wanted to discuss today, it's mainly a starting off the topic of mental health and emotions. And let me see if I can pull up a screen as well here. Are you guys seeing the screen right now?
Yeah, we're able to see your main desktop.
Okay.
There you
go. Okay, thanks. So, I think mainly it's okay to ask for help. Mental health treatment is kind of a much later stage, but the main thing is starting a discussion, right? If we are not comfortable talking about emotions and feelings which encompass the mental health world, then it really becomes hard for people to ask for help, for other people to offer help, and really to get to the point where, like, I'm a provider, Dr. Sabharwal is a provider, and Dr. Mutta is doing so much in Canada with so many families there. For us to really be active, it needs to get to the point where there's awareness, people are comfortable, people talk to others as if they would talk about other medical issues. So to start off with, I think I'm just going to pull up the next slide. Oops. All right. It's okay to feel, right? We think about things, and when we think about things, we have certain feelings. And I mean, these are common things, everybody has feelings. You could be happy, you could be sad, You could be afraid, you could be angry. So is it bad to have feelings? Not at all, right? But sometimes the intensity and the frequency, which means how severe are those feelings, how much are they affecting you, how much time do you spend in a certain state, an emotional state. Like if you're sad, it's okay to be sad here and there. Everybody gets sad. But if you're sad all the time, and if you're sad to a higher degree than maybe other people around you, then it becomes a burden, it becomes a disease in a way. Just the same way as, let's say, give you an analogy, we have a headache, right? We get headaches from time to time, we don't sleep well, we don't eat well, we get a headache, and it passes. Sometimes you take a Tylenol and it goes away. But there are people who are burdened with headaches that just never go away. You know, there are migraine headaches, there are other different kinds of headaches. So, and then we have to go seek for help. And we're not ashamed to talk to the doctor about, oh, doc, I have a headache and it seems to be getting bad. And I've been afflicted with it for about a month or so. But when it comes to sadness, there's not that openness with which we broach the topic. And leave alone with the doctor, even with family members. So I think, again, I just want to point out, like, just as if we have physical symptoms that happen, the emotions that we feel kind of lead to mental health issues as they as they keep on accruing because of stressors and other things. So what is mental health, right? Mental health is your emotional health, and your emotional health is the sum of all these emotions and feelings that we feel that they can intensify at times. Mental health is the ability for our body to be able to process these emotions effectively so we can still be productive members of the society. This means our own fortitude, right? Not everybody's the same at dealing with stress. Some people are, better at dealing with stress, and some people need more help. So there is that genetic makeup. There's society can have a big part to play. If we have some issues and we are with people who are able to help us navigate those issues, then we're not going to be feeling as emotionally sad and down and insecure. So the social health of a community, of a person, of a family, their genetic predisposition, they all lead to the concept of mental health. And mental health is a big topic. It's its own world, just like physical health is its own world. Mental health has so many subcategories, and we will in some future talks address them. But like today is just laying the foundation. What can happen now in this example that I had started out, let's say someone is burdened with feeling sad, inadequate, insignificant, because they're not able to navigate their emotions, and they almost feel ill-equipped. And this leads to them kind of over time, these feelings deepen into, they feel helpless, they feel hopeless, they really start feeling worthless. They feel like they're really a burden on the society or to the community, that people are negatively being held back because of them. And it's this sort of a buildup that can lead to a person wanting to end their life, which unfortunately does happen, right? We are worried to talk about, or we're scared to talk about suicide or atmhatya, ਆਪਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ. But it is real. It is as real of a symptom of depression and mental health as a heart attack is for someone who has cardiac issues. But it's almost like if someone tries to commit suicide in a family, it is hid from the world. It is hid from other people in the family. It's almost like this sense of shame that the family feels that this is happening in our world, and we don't want anyone to know. And if that is the mentality of people around you, your social support system, how are you going to get help, right? It stays in the family. It keeps on dragging you down. It drags other family members down, let alone, productivity and disability and stuff. You can lose a life, and that can break a family. So at the core part of it, why are we that way? And when I say we, I mean the world in general, because mental health stigma is real. It's everywhere. It's there in the Western world. It's there in minority kind of populations in the US. It's very much real in India. Like I'm from Punjab, and in Punjab, people still don't talk about these things. I've been a psychiatrist for 20 years, including in training, 15 years in practice. And still people don't talk to me about mental health when I know that they're having issues. So why is there this hesitancy that we don't want to talk about it, but we feel very comfortable talking about everything else? Like people talk to me about, oh, I have this stomach ache. And, for somehow they feel comfortable enough to seek my opinion on this, but not where I'm an expert. So I feel that I think it has to start with education. Like I grew up in Punjab most of my childhood, and I went to an English medium school. People said it's a great school. Not a single word of mental health was taught. This was not a topic that kids get exposed to. I don't think my parents either got exposed to it. I saw them in different mood states. Nobody talked about it, right? It was never a topic of discussion at the dinner table, as opposed to you will definitely talk about, oh, look, I got this today. I got an owie, I got hurt here, everything else, but not emotions. So I think it's a society thing. And it starts out at the grassroots level, where I think we need to introduce it in schools at basic community activities. It starts with just bringing up a topic. It starts with a person who's had mental health issues, maybe just sharing their story, and for other people to give them a platform, right? Because sometimes they want to tell their story, but they don't know how to do it. So I think that's what I wanted to highlight. So the fact, and the other thing is, I'll give an example, like someone breaks a bone, and everybody will call them, text them, go visit them, sign a get well soon on their cast, give them flowers, give them candy, make them feel good, right? And people do feel good. People appreciate other people being concerned. But if someone is hospitalized, let's say for depression, someone is in the psych ward because they were suicidal, or they actually had a suicide attempt, and then they get discharged, word gets around, people know it, but nobody goes, nobody calls. And the reason I hear is, ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਦੁੱਖ ਤਕਲੀਫਾਂ ਨੇ, ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਕੀ ਤਕਲੀਫ ਦੇਣੀ ਫੋਨ ਕਰਕੇ, ਕਿਉਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਾੜੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਯਾਦ ਕਰਾਉਣੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਚਲੋ ਠੀਕ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਗੇ, ਬਾਅਦ ਚ ਪੁੱਛ ਲਾਂਗੇ. And I think that highlights just us as a society not having the mental health awareness and the fortitude to be able to discuss these things. It's okay to find an excuse and brush it away. And that person who was suicidal, who was depressed, almost ready to end their life, they come back home and nothing's different. They might have started a medication in the hospital, but we know that medicines are a very small piece to the puzzle, right? It just maybe starts the process of healing at some level, but really that person is still as isolated as before. They might have a treatment team, but they don't have a support system yet. So I think we need to change that. That person, even if they get 5 texts of, oh, I heard about your predicament, hope you do well, I think that supports him more than any other medication. So I want to highlight that I think that's where we need to kind of grow as a community, which is why, it's so encouraging to see Anaika and other teens in the community take the initiative, because they're still young, and in time, in the future generations, as they grow older, as they have their families, we hope that they can spread that positive message to their kids. So maybe a generation from now, 2 generations from now, it is more widely accepted. And kind of with that in mind, I think I'll probably go to the next one. We already talked about the slide. I think, again, mental health and emotional health, I want people to be used to these terms. These are common things. You can bring them up in conversations. You can bring up feelings in a conversation. There is nothing wrong with that. You might learn something, right? Another person might have a different opinion on what stress is, and you might have a different one, but that's how education happens. Education happens by sharing ideas and opinions. And again, emotional health is more emotions and feelings, and these things are hard to talk about. Now, mental health is the ability to work on your thoughts so you make these emotions and feelings less intense and over time less distressing, right? And that is where Dr. Sabharwal is a psychologist. That is what she does. She is an expert at doing that. So when people are able to come to a provider, we challenge the misconceptions that you have in your mind. You might feel I'm worth nothing. We want you to leave that session that I am good at this, this, this. My situation is not as hopeless as I was thinking for it to be. So you have to give, the experts, the treatment teams, your support members a chance that change can happen, that this is not the end of the world for me. And just some common, I just put this picture. I found it on an Australia website. I was just Googling stuff. And I think sometimes I feel people do better with pictures rather than words. So why should they seek help? Or what should they think could be associated with mental health? Feeling anxious and worried. We all are anxious and we all worry at times. I think it's kind of in our nature. It's the kind of spectrum of emotions that we go through. But if you see someone who's more anxious or worried than you, let's say, talk to them about it, because they're having an emotion at a higher intensity than you're having. Maybe they want other people to broach the topic because they're not feeling very comfortable about it. Similarly with depression, if you recognize someone who's kind of more depressed, I think it just starts with a question and a kind of broaching the topic, saying that if you want to talk about it, you're available, they can text you later. You hear someone who says every day, oh, mainu neend nahi aandi, right? I mean, it's a common thing. Sare kehde ne unna nu neend nahi aandi. We could all use some more. But for someone who just has a chronic, I can think of so many people who tell me, like, mainu ta kade neend nahi aandi. And now as a clinician, I ask them ki koi hor problem ta nahi, घबराहट ta nahi, thonu depression ta nahi hundi, kyunki sometimes that sleep problem can unearth an underlying issue which has been causing it from the beginning, rather than chalo neend di goli le lo. That is not going to do anything, right? That's how people sometimes, they also get hooked on medications without anybody finding the cause of neend kyun nahi aandi. Banda ghat khanda, banda jyada khanda va, both can be associated with emotional distress and mental health issues. Kai loki bahut quiet hunde ne, withdrawn hunde ne, kehde ne ye ta chalo shuru da hi iddaं va. I tell you, there are some people who've been depressed for most of their life. Maybe when they were kids, their family situation was stressful and they never really opened up. And now that they're older, sometimes they just stay stuck in that mold. So they might be wanting an opening, they might be wanting to talk, and they might mushroom later in life. And having worked with kids, I see it so often where parents tell me after treatment, like, I never thought he could be happy. Like, I just thought he was damaged goods. And there was a parent who actually mentioned, I was so embarrassed that my kid is damaged goods. Substance abuse. And this is a huge topic, right? And we'll bring it up later. But a lot of times, people do alcohol and they do drugs because they don't know any better. They just want to dull their emotion, right? They don't want to feel as distressed. They don't want to feel as sad. Unhon nu hunda ki do peg la ke main khush ho jana, and then they have 2 pegs every day and more, and it escalates. But what was the reason why they're drinking? It's not always for fun. And so, you have to sometimes talk to the person, if it's a friend, a family member, and see if this could be an opening of a discussion. So just keep these emojis in mind. And I wish we had more of these emojis than the typical smileys and everything that we see on social media. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, but as I was pointing to Anika before, July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And as we have kind of rolled this ball kind of towards more education and awareness, I think we should be looking to do more for the minorities in July. There will be more content, hopefully, that we can share as well. And this is just, again, I don't know, I thought I'll throw it in there because everybody talks about COVID. Actually, people have talked to me more because now they have a reason to ask me, like, Dr. Sahab, COVID karke ta sare nu stress hunda. And then I ask them, fir thonu vi ho reha lagda ki dasna Dr. Sahab, and that's how you start a topic, right? COVID is a huge environmental stressor, which not only teens who have lost all social relationships that have been stuck at home, young adults who haven't been able to go to college, people who have lost their jobs, people who are working from home. People have lost their support system, and mental health rates are high. Anxiety, depression rates are at all-time highs, I would say, or at least that I have seen. I don't know, I haven't been through a big kind of a stressful situation. Maybe older people might have, but at least these are the highest that I've seen. And an environmental stressor that has sort of paralyzed the world has been responsible for it. And that can be a great conversation opener. People don't feel as threatened when you bring up COVID and you talk about stress. But if you bring up stress in general, they clam up because now they feel like they have to share their personal life to you and they're not very comfortable. Similar slide, it just shows the rates, and you can look at how high the peaks are going from 2019, early 2020, and now as we go into the next year. And I think this year's data is going to be similar, at least the first part of 2021. So yeah, just ending with, and Anika, are we okay with time?
Yeah, I think we're just up at 15 minutes.
All right. So again, I won't take too much time, but just, depression. When we talk about depression, people sometimes don't know how to bring about a conversation. So depression is about emotions, and we talked about most of these. Depression is about thoughts. I'm not good enough, right? People are indecisive, people are confused, people don't feel productive. So all those are negative thoughts, and they're left with the impression that they're not good enough. That needs to be challenged because everyone has something that's going well for them. Everyone has some positives and attributes, and you can find them easily. A family member comes in and they tell you 5 things about the person that he had never told you because he's lost his confidence, right? So bring in more people, cultivating supports. Physical symptoms, we touched upon that. Sleep, lack of energy, fatigue, all these can be conversation openers. All these are physical symptoms that can happen with depression, with anxiety. But people, if they don't bring it up with their doctors, or vitamin levels check karke, they keep on taking multivitamins and they keep on complaining that things are just not better. And again, behaviors, you cry too much, you withdraw from others, you isolate a lot. We saw that in COVID. Self-hygiene is affected. People are angry. Sometimes it's easy, especially at younger age groups. People are not able to articulate as much. So all you see is a behavior. And it starts with the behavior, and you track your kind of way back to figure out what is causing this behavior, what kind of change has happened. So just wanted to kind of give you this wheel because it shows us how we can pick up symptoms of depression and how we can talk about mental health. And I'm just giving you guys verbiage and stuff because I think it is so important to increase our vocabulary with mental health. Thanks, Emma.
So thank you so much for sharing on that. Next up, we're going to kind of go off the same idea. So we'll have Dr. Preet Sabharwal. So I'm just going to go ahead and give her a quick introduction as well. All right. So Dr. Preet Sabharwal will be presenting on breaking the stigmas in South American communities and providing available resources as well as types of support and going over kind of privacy and confidentiality. So she is the founder of South Asian Mental Health Consortium and this is organized basically focusing on supporting and providing spaces for students, providers, and advocates of South Asian mental health in order to increase kind of more of an open dialogue and break a lot of the stigmas that we might have about mental health, as well as increasing empowerment and practicing social justice. So she's also a program coordinator of the South Asian Community Health Promotion Services Program, and this is done at a community behavioral health agency called HEAM Center. Here, she provides clinical services in both Punjabi and Hindi, so she's able to cater to a vast audience. And she has presented on South Asian mental health at conferences all over the United States, making her one of the front runners of South Asian mental health advocacy. In October 2019, she actually was recognized by the Asian American Psychological Association for her outstanding contributions to Asian American psychology, and she received the AAPA Early Career Award for distinguished contributions to service. So she's done an outstanding job kind of providing care and really ensuring that our community is so well versed on mental health. And so she's going to go ahead and present now, so feel free to take it over.
Thank you, Anika, for that wonderful introduction, and for Dr. Sekhon for starting us off today and beginning to have that conversation that a lot of us have a really hard time having around mental health and emotional wellness. So just give me a second. I'm going to also share my screen. And as we start talking about why is it hard for our communities to seek mental health services or emotional wellness services? So I'm going to focus a lot on today is stigmas within the community around mental health and emotional wellness, and how that plays a role in us seeking out services or not seeking out services. So as we start thinking about what are some of the stigmas, or what are some of those barriers, and number one barrier that we find within these communities is the lack of knowledge. And so mental health, the concept is very foreign. It's not something, like Dr. Sekhon mentioned, it's not something that we talk about. It doesn't come easily to us. We don't, express our emotions. There's not conversations we have at the dinner table. Oftentimes when someone is going through a mental health challenge, it's seen as a character flaw or a personal weakness. We might say, if you just try harder, if you just put your man laga ke padho, man laga ke himmat karo, that you'll get better. And so that really makes the person that's struggling internalize those messages, and then those messages then become the lack of self-confidence, the lack of self-esteem, like Dr. Sekhon was talking about, and that leads to depression and anxiety. And then also that mental illness is seen as either black or white. So we see either you're crazy and you need to be locked up, so tusi pagal ya, tanu hospital chhona chahida hai, or that you're normal, and there's no in between. So we don't see mental health on a spectrum, whereas it is on a spectrum. We all fall somewhere along the spectrum, and we will all go through mental health challenges throughout our lifetime. We may not get to the extreme of needing to be hospitalized, but there may be times in life where we could benefit from talking to someone, or we could benefit from disclosing that information to our physician, or even possibly seeing a psychologist or a mental health provider. But that doesn't mean that we're crazy or boggle. It's just that we're going through a challenge and we need some extra support and help to work through that challenge. Then the biggest stigma or barrier within the community, and for a lot of minority communities, is the shame and guilt. And what does that mean? And the first and foremost is whatever's happening within our family, we often don't talk about it with others outside of the family. There's this sense of, and so that really makes us feel like I'm struggling, but I can't go and tell anyone, because then that would bring shame onto my family, that I'm talking about my family members to others outside of the home. And then to go along with that is, what will others think? What will others think about our family? What will others think about our parenting style if our child is struggling? What will they think about, our way of being respectful towards our, elder parents? If they're struggling, it may look like we're not taking care of them. And so this log ki kehenge concept really prevents the community from asking for support and help when a mental health challenge is present for a family member, or even within the family. If there's a struggle, there's family conflicts, communication struggles, all of those things we try to keep and solve within the family, and we don't want to go outside of the family to get those things managed. And that really prevents us and puts us in the position where we're going to continue to stay in that distress. And so we want to work through this. We want to have these conversations, normalize these conversations, so that when someone's struggling, there's not that fear of log ki kehenge. If we're all talking about mental health, and we're all talking about how you can get past a challenge, where you can get support, it won't be something that we would hide from each other anymore. The whole community is talking about it, much like physical health. And so there's probably a time where we didn't want to talk about physical ailments within the family, like diabetes or heart disease. There was perhaps shame associated with those as well. But as the community began talking about this, about genetic predispositions to certain health conditions, the community was more open and willing to talk about it. And so Dr. Sekhon mentioned the concept of sleep. So we'll often see clients come in and they're really willing to talk about sleep. They're able to talk about, I don't minu jadi need on dia, minu kat need on dia, merat nu urtada renna ya, jamet to soni hunda rat nu. They're able to talk about those things, and that's a conversation opener, as Dr. Sekhon was mentioning. Like, that's where you can start having a conversation about, okay, well, what are you thinking about before you go to sleep? What does your sleep hygiene look like? And all of those things can lead to even bigger and broader conversations around emotional wellness as well as mental health. So in order for us to normalize mental health conversations, we also need to understand why there are mental health myths and where they come from. And so one of the myths is that since we have such a good connection to our community and our families, that these things can help address anxiety, depression, and stress. And so there's no need for professional help. And there is some truth to this. There is some truth to us being able to have supportive family members, supportive communities, cultural supports that could help when we're experiencing anxiety and depression. But there may be a time where that's not enough. And so we also need to understand that although those traditional ties can help, they may not be enough at times. And so it's really important that we understand where that line is drawn so that once we get beyond that, that we're able to ask for help. And then also that stress, anxiety, and depression are Western health dilemmas. So we'll often hear family members and parents say like, "Sade ka ranch nahi kam hunda, ithe hunda ya, America vich hunda ya, sade nahi hunda." And so really educating and informing that mental health, emotional wellness, and physical health, they all tie into one another. And so it's really important to understand that these things do occur. Yes, we have a lot of protective factors within our communities, within our culture, but that doesn't mean that these things are not present within our community and our culture. And then also that mental health symptoms have to be severe in order to seek out help. So we'll often see families and individuals reach out for supports when they're in a crisis. So someone's being hospitalized because there is a suicidal attempt, or they've expressed wanting to hurt themselves or hurting someone else. Or if there's family conflict, there may be child abuse or domestic violence reported. And so we'll see folks come in for mental health services after that crisis has occurred. And we want to have these conversations so that we can do more preventative care around emotional wellness and mental health. And so just like you go to your doctor once a year to get your physical, we want to encourage the community to go and get a mental health checkup. And so doing that preventative work, what are your coping strategies? Well, who are your support systems around you? So that when you do go to a point where there is a crisis, that you can lean on those supports in order to feel better, rather than having to be hospitalized, rather than having to go to the emergency room. And then what Dr. Sekhon talked about, that piece of, okay, well, someone's been hospitalized now, and then there's that shame and guilt of how do we hide this from the community, or how do we respond to this person? How do we ask them how they're feeling, not knowing how to, even be present and supportive of someone once they've been hospitalized. And then also thinking that positive stages in life, such as marriage, having a child, getting a new job, moving, that these things don't result in stress and anxiety, and thinking that you should only go if you're going through a crisis or there's something terrible that happened in your life. There's grief or loss or a trauma. And just wanting to educate the community that that's not the case. We go through so many transitions in life. All of us right now are going to go through a huge transition as things are opening up. We're all going to go back to work. We're all going to go back to school. Those transitions are going to come with a huge level of stress, a huge level of worry and anxiety. And those are times where you could also go into crisis mode. And so it's really important to understand that life transitions can also come with their mental health challenges. It's not just when we're going through a grief or a loss or a trauma. And so really working with families and encouraging them to seek out supports. We've seen a lot of kids struggle when they're going from elementary to middle school, or middle to high school, and eventually high school to college. And then also wanting to highlight the model minority myth, which also influences how we feel about mental health as a community, is that we're the model minority myth, or the model minority title, is something that engulfs the identity of the South Asian community, that we come from successful households, that we're smart, that we're rich, and that we don't struggle, that we don't have mental health challenges. And so when this image has been given to us, when we immigrate to this country, we try to live up to those expectations that the larger society has of us. And so we don't ask for help. And that's not just for mental health services, it's really hard for this community to ask for help when they're struggling in any way. So the model minority myth really prevents our communities from seeking out supports and help. And we've seen that for physical health as well, is that they don't go to the doctor as often as they could or they should. And then if they're not taking care of their physical health, the mental health is not getting taken care of either. And so that really overshadows what the needs are for the community. It's been really hard to get research funded. It's been really hard to get programs funded because there is no data around, do South Asian community members, are they seeking out services? Are they engaging in services? And so then we can't find information and support things like domestic violence or sexual violence within the community, or immigration related stresses within the community. And in order to understand these impacts on our community, we really need to unpack some of the things that come with the model minority myth, and really encourage folks to have these conversations so that we can work through that. So like Dr. Sekhon had mentioned, what are some ways that you might notice that someone's struggling? So that could be yourself, that could be a family member. So we look at those challenges that some folks are having. So are they having emotional challenges? Are they having physical challenges? Are they having social challenges? And so there are different levels of care that they can engage in. And so the first level of care obviously would be that we would encourage the community, if you feel that you or someone else is struggling with their mental health or with their emotional wellness, is for them to engage in community supports, to reach out to family and friends. And we always encourage youth to reach out to trusted adults within their community or their family system. Start talking to teachers and school counselors if you've noticed, a mood change or a change in sleep and change in eating. And then also engaging in spiritual practices. So focusing on coping strategies that are already present within that person's toolkit, and helping them get connected to those coping strategies and supports. When you've identified that that's not enough for yourself or your family member, then there's a second level of care. And that's to reach out and start reaching out for outside supports. And this is where the community has a really hard time. So we're doing a wonderful job with the first level of care. We are able to have, we're getting to a point where we can have conversations, at least within our family systems, about our struggles. And as Dr. Sekhon mentioned as well, like the youth are having these conversations. I am so astonished at how many mental health conversations are happening amongst the youth. And so we're having these conversations within our community, but we're not getting to that second level of care. And then there are other barriers there. There's linguistic and cultural barriers, but there are lots of services available where you can attend workshops that are focused on particular, it could be on anxiety, it could be on time management, stress management, so that they can address some of those initial challenges that you might be experiencing, or finding a support group. So there, especially now during the pandemic, support groups have been very helpful to increase social engagement for youth, social engagement for the elderly community, or finding peer support groups where you may find folks that are also struggling in similar ways. Doing some self-help. So there's a lot of self-help books out there. There's a lot of websites that you can engage in, a lot of apps on your phones that can really support in finding breathing exercises and mindfulness activities. And then there's lots of hotlines available. If you feel like you want to talk to someone, but you're not ready to go into a clinic, you're not ready to actually engage in therapy, there are hotlines that you can reach out to. There's youth hotlines, there's adult hotlines, where there will be trained professionals that could talk to you, briefly talk to you for 15, 20 minutes, and really support you in understanding what resources you may benefit from. So once you've engaged in the second level of care, and that's not helping, and the person's still struggling, or you're still struggling, then we move on to the third level of care. And this is where you start reaching out to your employee assistance programs, or you look at your insurance companies, to see where can you get extra support. And so that they may connect you to your physician, who may rule out any physiological or biological concerns for why you're feeling this way. Or they may refer you to a psychiatrist that could help you with medicine management. They may identify that you may benefit from meeting with a psychologist, who could be they could be a doctorate level or a master's level clinician, or you may benefit from someone that's a social worker. And then always, please remember that if you are in an emergency, it's really important to call 911 or go to an emergency room. And so just lastly, as you know, all of these topics, we're going to go into a lot more detail, as we're just laying the foundation for mental health work within our communities. But there's also this fear that if we go and talk to someone, again, that shame and guilt comes up for the community, is if we go and talk to someone about emotional wellness, that others are going to find out, that my family's going to find out, or the community is going to find out. And so really wanted to remind and educate the community that mental health records are considered private health information. So we won't share this information with anyone unless you give us permission, or your parent gives us permission if you're a child. And this information will not be shared with colleges, with teachers. Your employer will not find out, so they don't find out about your medical history. They won't find out about your mental health history either. There are some limits to confidentiality, and just wanted to highlight those, that if we feel you're going to harm yourself or someone else, that we would have to report that, or if a child or elder is being abused, or if we get a court order, that we have to divulge your medical records. So as always, I just want to emphasize that this, like Dr. Sekhon said, I think he put it beautifully, that this is just the foundation. We're going to have lots of other workshops that are going to go into a lot more detail, but we want to start having these conversations to normalize them, so that we can break through the stigma and not be afraid of lo kehenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that incredible presentation. I think that was a great way to go ahead and introduce all these topics. And so now we'll be transitioning to Mr. Baldev Mutta. So he will be presenting on women and mental health, abuse, and the emotional and physical well-being of women, as well as covering a few extra topics that were brought to our attention today. So he also works with this specific organization that he is the CEO of, and this is called the Punjabi Community Health Services Organization, which is in Canada. And it's in the field of social work, and it has been for the last 45 plus years. So the organization, it has an acronym of PCHS, and Sahayatha is partnering with PCHS to put on webinars to benefit from experience that they and Mr. Baldev Mutta have gained working with the South Asian community in Canada. So PCHS and Sahayatha will be hosting 5 webinars starting in June, where our June webinar will be on parenting, and then we'll be sharing a survey towards the end to understand the needs of our community in subsequent webinars. So today, I'll give a brief overview of PCHS and Mr. Baldev Mutta's work, and then he'll go ahead and get started. So Mr. Mutta is tenaciously working and raising awareness around issues of substance abuse, mental health, gender inequality, and toxic masculinity, predominantly in the Punjabi community. And he has worked for the last 28 years to develop an integrated holistic model to provide accessible and culturally appropriate services to our community. Mr. Mutta has also received many community awards for his work on equity, community, and development and organizational changes. So today he's going to be discussing a little bit more closely on some of the topics I mentioned, as well as mental health and awareness. So if you want to go ahead and take this stage.
Baldev, you're on mute.
जितने भी लिसनर्स मैंने सुन रहे आ या देख रहे आ मैंने दोनों हाथ जोड़ के सत श्री अकाल मैं ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਥੋੜੀ ਜੀ ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟੀਕਲ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਆ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਔਮਨ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਅਰਾਊਂਡ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਥੋੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟੀਕਲ ਟਰਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਔਮਨ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆ ਕੇ ਦੱਸਦੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੈਟਲਮੈਂਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਸੈਟਲ ਹੁੰਨੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮੈਟਿਕ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੰਨਾ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਇੰਨੀਆਂ ਡਿਫਿਕਲਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਿਕਲਣਾ ਪਊਗਾ ਜਿੰਨੀ ਡਿਫਿਕਲਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੀ ਉਹ ਨਿਕਲਦੀਆਂ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਜਾਣੀ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਰੀ ਆਪਣਾ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ, ਸਾਰਾ ਸਿਸਟਮ, ਸਪੋਰਟ ਸਿਸਟਮ, ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੈਟਲ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਨਵੇਂ ਸਿਰਿਓਂ, ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ ਆ। ਕੰਮ ਤੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ ਆ। ਔਰ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਅਗਰ ਉਹ ਨਿਊਲੀ ਮੈਰਿਡ ਆ ਤੇ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਨਵੇਂ ਮਦਰ ਬਣੀ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਅਗਰ ਹੈਲਪ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਈ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਬੜਾ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਿਹਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਣ ਕਿ ਬੇਬੀ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰਨਾ, ਕਿਵੇਂ ਇਹਦੀ ਟੇਕ ਕੇਅਰ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ। ਉਹ ਇਟਸੈਲਫ ਬਿਕਮ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਵਿਮਨ ਆ, ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਡਿਫਿਕਲਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੁਜ਼ਰਦੀਆਂ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਫਰੰਟ ਆਪਣਾ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਰੱਖਦੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਆ। ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਤੱਕ ਵੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਹਸਬੈਂਡ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੱਸਦੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਜਾਣੀ ਪੇਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੀ ਗੁਜ਼ਰ ਰਹੀਆਂ। ਔਰ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੈਟਲਮੈਂਟ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਆ, ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਡੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਨਟੇਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹ ਫੋਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਸਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਇਨਟੇਕ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਤਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕੋਈ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਤਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ। ਸੈਕੰਡ ਚੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੀ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਇਮੈਜਿਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜੌਬ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਡਿਸਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਫੇਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਪਊਗਾ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਆ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਣਾ ਤੇ ਮਾਈਕਰੋ ਅਗਰੈਸ਼ਨਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਣਾ ਔਰ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਅਸਰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਾਰਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਲੱਗਦਾ। ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਤਾਂ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਚੰਗੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ, ਪਰ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਸ਼ਬਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ। ਉਹ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਐਡੀਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਆ। ਲੇਕਿਨ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਿਚਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਬਿਲਡ ਹੋਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ। ਤੇ ਥਰਡ ਚੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਭੈਣਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸੀ, ਉਹ ਇਹ ਆ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਇਵੈਂਟ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ 'ਚ, ਸਾਡੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ 'ਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਬੜਾ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ ਆ। ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਕਸਰ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਵਟ ਡੂ ਯੂ ਮੀਨ ਬਾਈ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਇਵੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ ਆ? ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਮੈਰਿਜ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ ਆ, ਸਾਡੀ ਬੱਚੇ ਦਾ ਬਰਥਡੇ ਮਨਾਉਣਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ ਆ, ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਘਰ ਖਰੀਦਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਸਟਰੈਸਫੁਲ ਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੰਮ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਉਹ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਗੈਸਟ ਦੀ ਟੇਕ ਕੇਅਰ ਕਰਨ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਸੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਇੰਜੋਏ ਕਰਨ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਕੌਨਸਟੈਂਟਲੀ ਅੰਡਰ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਆ। ਤੇ ਫਾਈਨਲੀ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਡਿਫਿਕਲਟੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਆ, ਉਹ ਇਹ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਹ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਿਰ ਦੁਖਣ ਲੱਗ ਗਿਆ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਸਿੰਪਟਮਸ ਹੋ ਕੇ, ਪਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਕੋਲੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਹੋਇਆ ਕੀ ਆ, ਲਾਈਕ ਵਾਟ ਇਜ਼ ਇਟ। ਪਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੰਨਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ, ਹੁਣ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਆ। ਸੋ ਉਸ ਸੈਂਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਜਾਣੀ ਇਨੀਸ਼ੀਅਲੀ ਟਾਈਮ ਲੱਗਦਾ, ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਪਤਾ ਕਰਨਾ ਕਿ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਕੀ ਆ। ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਡੋਮੈਸਟਿਕ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਪੋਸਟਪਾਰਟਮ ਡਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਤੇ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਇਨ-ਲਾਜ਼ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਦੀ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਪਾਂਸਰ ਕਰੋ, ਜਲਦੀ ਬੁਲਾਓ, ਜਲਦੀ ਬੁਲਾਓ, ਜਲਦੀ ਬੁਲਾਓ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਹਜੇ ਸੈੱਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏ ਤੇ ਉਧਰੋਂ ਰਿਕੁਐਸਟ ਵੀ ਆਉਣੀਆਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਗਈਆਂ। ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ, ਇਹ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਵਿਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਵਿਮਨ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਇਨੋਰਮਸ ਅਮਾਊਂਟ ਆਫ ਚੈਲੰਜਿੰਗ ਆ। ਅੱਛਾ, ਦੂਸਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸੱਭਰਵਾਲ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਲੋਕ ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਗੇ। ਹੁਣ ਜੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ, ਆਪਣਾ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਨਿਰਭਰ ਕਰਦੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਲੋਕ ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਗੇ, ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਨੈਸੈਸਰੀਲੀ ਇਹਦਾ ਆਊਟਕਮ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਨਾ ਬਾਹਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਦੱਸੋ। ਔਰ ਮਜ਼ੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਦੇਰ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਣੀ ਖੁੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਖੁੱਲ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਜਾਂ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਚੈਲੰਜਸ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਖਿਆਲ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇਦਾਰੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ? ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਪਤਾ, ਈਵਨ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੱਕ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਫਲਾਣੇ ਦੇ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਆ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ। ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਡਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਲੋਕ ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਗੇ, ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪੇ ਬਾਹਰ ਦੱਸੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਕੀਤੀ, ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ 'ਚ ਕਿਸੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇਦਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਤੀ, ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇਦਾਰ ਨੇ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਫੋਨ ਕਰਤਾ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਲੀਕੇਜ ਤਾਂ ਆਪੇ ਕਰਤੀ, ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਲੋਕ ਤਾਂ ਆਪੇ ਹੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਹੈਲਪ ਲੈਂਦੇ? ਸੋ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਰਪੋਰ ਬਿਲਡਿੰਗ ਆ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਮਨ ਨਾਲ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਹੈਲਪ ਲੈਣ ਲਈ ਆਈ ਆ ਆਪਣੇ ਡਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਪਹਿਲੀਆਂ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ 'ਚ 3-4 ਮੀਟਿੰਗਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਸੇ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਨਿਕਲ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਕੀ ਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਵਿਚਾਰੀ ਹਜੇ ਦੱਸ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਉਂਦੀ ਖੁੱਲ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਕੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਆ। ਸੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਡੋਮੈਸਟਿਕ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਆ, ਇਨ-ਲਾਜ਼ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਆ, ਕੰਮ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਫੇਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਉਹਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਹੈਲਥ ਨਾ ਠੀਕ ਹੋਵੇ, ਆਲ ਕਾਈਂਡ ਆਫ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਇੰਟਰਟਵਾਈਨ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ। ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ। ਸੈਕੰਡ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਇਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵਿਮਨ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੁਝ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬੜੀਆਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਆਊਟ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ। ਉਹ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਕਰਨਾ, ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਕਰ ਲਈਏ। ਉਹ ਟੋਟਲੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਟਾਈਮ ਆਊਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੀਆਂ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਿਆ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਗਿਲਟੀ ਫੀਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਵੀ ਲੈ ਮੈਂ ਹੁਣ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾਣੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਮੂਵੀ ਦੇਖਣੀ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਕੁਝ ਕਰਨਾ। ਉਹ ਕਨਸਟੈਂਟਲੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਹੱਦ ਤੱਕ ਸੈਟਿਸਫੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਆ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਅੰਡਰ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਚੀਜ਼ 'ਚ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਕੇ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨੀਸ਼ੀਅਲੀ ਸਟੇਜ 'ਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਸੀ। ਸੈਕੰਡ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਦੋਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਮਦਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਬਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਘਰ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਪਿਕ ਐਂਡ ਸਪੈਨ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਕਿਚਨ ਸਾਡੀ ਐਬਸੋਲੂਟਲੀ ਸਪਿਕ ਐਂਡ ਸਪੈਨ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ, ਚਾਹੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਫੁੱਲ ਟਾਈਮ ਜੌਬ ਕਰਨੀ ਪਵੇ, ਘਰ ਆ ਕੇ ਰੋਟੀ ਬਣਾਉਣੀ ਪਵੇ, ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਲਾਉਣਾ ਪਵੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੋਮਵਰਕ ਕਰਾਉਣਾ ਪਵੇ, ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਿਚਨ ਤੇ ਘਰ ਗੰਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਕਿਹਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ? who said it? ਵੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਿਰ ਦੁਖਦਾ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਆਰਾਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ? ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਸਾਡੀ ਕਿਚਨ ਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਘਰ ਸਪਿਕ ਐਂਡ ਸਪੈਨ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਐਂਡ ਫਸਟ ਕਲਾਸ ਕਲੀਨ। ਕਿਉਂ? ਔਰ ਇਹ ਬੜਾ ਅਜੀਬ ਜਿਹਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸੁਣਨ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਭੈਣਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਐਕਸਪੈਕਟੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਆਪਣੇ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ ਇੰਨੀਆਂ ਹਾਈ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹਸਬੈਂਡ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਇਨ-ਲਾਜ਼ ਨਾ ਬਾਦਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਣ ਵੀ ਚੱਲ ਕੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਜੇ ਤੂੰ ਕਾਕਾ ਬਿਮਾਰ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਤੂੰ ਚੁੱਪ ਕਰਕੇ ਪੈ ਜਾ, ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪੇ ਦੇਖ ਲਾਂਗੇ, ਜੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਕੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਕਰ ਲਾਂਗੇ, ਜਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ ਭਾਂਡੇ ਡਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ਼ਰ 'ਚ ਪਾ ਦਾਂਗੇ, ਤੂੰ ਫਿਕਰ ਨਾ ਕਰ। ਲੇਕਿਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਬੈਡ ਫੀਲ ਹੋਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਤੇ ਉੱਠ ਕੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਆਪਣਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਵਿਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਇਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕਰਤਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਵਿਚਾਰੀਆਂ ਰਿਲੈਕਸ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀਆਂ? ਇੱਕ ਬਿਗਰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਆ। ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਇਡੈਂਟੀਫਾਈ ਕਰਨਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਿਚਾਰੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਇਲਨੈਸ ਕੀ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਕੀ ਆ। ਸੈਕੰਡ, ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸ ਵੀ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਿਪਰੈਸਡ ਹੋ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਟਾਈਮ ਆਊਟ ਲੈਣਾ ਪਊਗਾ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਾਉਂਸਲਿੰਗ ਤੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਪਊਗਾ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਲਾਈਫ ਸਟਾਈਲ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਚੇਂਜ ਕਰੋ, ਲੈਟਸ ਫਿਗਰ ਇਟ ਆਊਟ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਹੋਣਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਬਾਕੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਵੀ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ। ਤੇ ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਘਰ ਵੀ ਸਾਫ਼ ਰੱਖਣਾ, ਕਿਚਨ ਵੀ ਸਾਫ਼ ਰੱਖਣੀਆਂ, ਬੱਚੇ ਵੀ ਸਪਿਕ ਐਂਡ ਸਪੈਨ ਹੋਣ, ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਵੇ, ਤੇ ਉਧਰੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ ਟਾਈਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੱਢਣਾ, ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਟ੍ਰੀਟਮੈਂਟ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਵਰਕ ਕਰੂਗੀ? ਔਰ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਬਹੁਤੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਉਂਦੀਆਂ, ਉਹ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵਿਮਨ ਆ ਉਹ ਟਾਈਮ ਸਿਰ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਾਉਂਸਲਿੰਗ ਅਪਾਇੰਟਮੈਂਟ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਨਹੀਂ। ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੜੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਨਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਠੀਕ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੇਟ ਆਏ ਹੋ ਅੱਧੇ ਘੰਟੇ, ਪਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਕੀ ਸੀ? ਬਸ ਭਾਂਡੇ ਚੱਕਦੇ ਸੀ ਭਾਂਡੇ ਚੱਕਦੇ ਸੀ ਕਿਚਨ 'ਚ, ਜਾਂ ਉਹ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਸ ਉਹ ਨਿਆਣੇ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਚਲੋ ਜੀ ਰੋਟੀ ਦੇ ਦਈਏ, ਬਸ ਉਹ ਰੋਟੀ ਖਾਂਦਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗਾ, ਉਹ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਲੱਗ ਗਿਆ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਨਸੈਪਟ ਆ ਵੀ ਕਾਉਂਸਲਿੰਗ ਇਜ਼ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਟੂ ਗੈਟ ਬੈਟਰ, ਉਹ ਕਨਸੈਪਟ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਟੇਕ ਓਵਰ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੋਚ ਆ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਿਹੇਵੀਅਰਸ ਆ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਲਾਈਫ ਸਟਾਈਲ ਆ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਖਿਆਲ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਪੁਆਇੰਟਰਸ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਵਾਕਫ ਕਰਾਈਏ, ਜਾਣੂ ਕਰਾਈਏ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨਾਰਮਲ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸਿਸ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਕੰਨੀ ਨੂੰ ਵੱਧਦੇ ਹੋ ਉਦੋਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਾਹਰ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਉਹਦੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆਪਾਂ ਮੰਨੀਏ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਦੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੰਨਾਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਆਪਾਂ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਵਾਂਗੇ। ਐਂਡ ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਆ। ਤੀਸਰੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਕਿ ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਜਾਣੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਕੋਲੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ ਕੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਦਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਲੇ ਦੁਆਲੇ 'ਚ ਉਹ ਨਾ ਦੱਸੋ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਲੇ ਦੁਆਲੇ 'ਚ ਦੱਸੋਗੇ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਸਾਈਕਾਇਟਰਿਸਟ ਕੋਲੇ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੈਡੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਪਾਇਆ ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰਲੀ ਤੇ ਉਹਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਸਿਰਫ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ 15 ਦਿਨ ਦੀ ਨੀਂਦ ਦੀ ਗੋਲੀਆਂ ਮਿਲਣਗੀਆਂ, ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਆ ਕੇ ਦੱਸਤਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਈਕਾਇਟਰਿਸਟ ਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ 15 ਦਿਨ ਦੀ ਨੀਂਦ ਦੀ ਗੋਲੀ ਤੇ ਪਾਇਆ, ਤੇ ਉਦੋਂ ਹੀ ਇਮੀਡੀਏਟਲੀ 36 ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਲਾਹਾਂ ਮਿਲਣ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਣਗੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਯੋਗਾ ਕਰ ਲਓ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਾਮ ਸਿਮਰਨ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ ਕਰੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਠੰਡੇ ਪਾਣੀ ਨਾਲ ਨਹਾ ਲਿਆ ਕਰੋ, ਦੁੱਧ ਪੀ ਲਿਆ ਕਰੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਦਵਾਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਈਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ, ਇਹ ਗਰਮ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਇਹਦੇ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਸਾਈਡ ਇਫੈਕਟ ਹੋਣਗੇ, ਆਲ ਕਾਈਂਡ ਆਫ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਿੰਪਟਮਸ ਦੇ ਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਨਫਿਊਜ਼ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਾ। ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਕੋਲੇ ਜਾਓਗੇ, ਡਾਕਟਰ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛੂਗਾ ਵੀ ਓਕੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਨੀਂਦ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ, ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਜੀ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੁਹਾਡੀਆਂ ਗੋਲੀਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਲਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਕਹਿਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਗਰਮੀ ਕਰਨਗੀਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਬੰਦ ਕਰਤਾ ਸੀ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਆ ਉਹ ਬੜੀਆਂ ਰੀਅਲ ਆ। ਤੋ ਉਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ 'ਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੈਸਨ ਇਹ ਲਰਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਆਹ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਕੀਤੇ ਆ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸੱਭਰਵਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਇੱਕ ਬੜੀ ਸਲਾਈਡ ਵਧੀਆ ਲੱਗੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਮਿਥ ਆ, ਕੁਛ ਆਪਾਂ ਮਿਥ ਲਈ ਫਿਰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਆ। ਉਹ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਕੁਛ ਸੈਸ਼ਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਕਰ ਦਈਏ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਲਾਇੰਟਸ ਨਾਲ ਬਈ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਪਊਗਾ, ਰਿਐਲਿਟੀ ਕੀ ਆ, ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨਾ, ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕੀ ਕਰੂਗੀ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਚੇਂਜ ਹੋਈਏ। ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਕਸੈਸ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਸੁਣਨ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਵਰਕ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫਿਕਰ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ। ਤੇ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਜੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮੌਕਾ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਤੇ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਅਲਾਓ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਆਹ ਸਿੰਪਟਮਸ ਆ, ਐਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਵਰਕ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ, ਐਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਠੀਕ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਗੇ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਇੰਜ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਇਸ ਲਵਡ ਵਨ ਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਨਾ। ਸੋ ਉਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੇ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕੀਤਾ, ਤੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਟਾਈਮ 'ਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਡੈਫੀਨਿਟਲੀ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਹੋਰ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਇੱਕ ਕੇਸ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਟੇਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਸਟੇਜਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੀ ਗਏ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਲਾਂਗੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਮੈਂ ਕੁਝ ਸ਼ਬਦਾਂ 'ਚ ਆਪਣਾ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਆ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਮਦਰਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ।
Okay, so thank you so much for sharing your input on your experience with mothers and with women. And I think that everyone who shared today brought up some really great points and were able to give such a great introduction into mental well-being, mental wellness, and share with our community some of the resources and ways going about things. So now we're going to go ahead and jump into a quick Q&A. So I actually had one question to go ahead and begin this kind of part of the process, and any of you can answer this. This is just kind of more of a general question, but I came up with this when Dr. Sekhon was kind of talking about addressing people who do face kind of, poor mental health or mental well-being. So I was wondering, because I have had friends who I've noticed, maybe aren't in the best mental state, but I feel like because it's a topic that is so kind of pushed around and it's difficult to talk about with people, I don't really know how to approach that situation or how to reach out to them in a way that's not kind of too instigative, because it can be hard for a lot of people to talk about. So I was wondering, do you have any recommendations on how to approach someone who is experiencing poor mental health and how to go about it without making them feel uncomfortable and what to say? Because I know, at my school, we do learn a little bit about these things. And so a lot of the times they say that it's better to be very empathetic, and sometimes it's better to spend more time with that person, but not necessarily say anything. But from a doctor's perspective, I was wondering if you had any input on that.
I can jump in, and then I'd love to hear from everyone else on the panel. But I think the most important, especially within our community, is that when someone is struggling, is not to jump in to offer advice or suggestions, because that's very invalidating. And so it's really important for us to validate their experience, what they're going through right now. And so all of the things that you mentioned, empathy, showing up, being there, is very important, but also validating their experience. And you may have gone through something similar and it wasn't a challenge for you, it didn't cause as much stress or distress, but that doesn't mean it's not causing that for them. So just being validating, not questioning what they're going through, and not jumping to offer suggestions.
Yeah, no, I think just to second that, such a wonderful question, because this is what I think our whole series is about. We do see people around us. Sometimes we suspect something is amiss. Sometimes we know something is amiss, right? And just what do we do next? And we sometimes hear about it in hindsight because that causes you to have more anxiety about the person. So you might be sharing it with, you know, a provider or a friend. So because and you can only imagine what it might be feeling for the other person. So yeah, no, I think it's totally just kind of validating it back, just echoing it back, right? What you sense from the person, just to kind of try to put it into words that it must be very difficult for you to be feeling this way. And I don't even know, but I just wanted to reach out that it must be challenging. I think any opening statement, you've already kind of broken the ice because that person knows you care or you care enough. And, you know, they will reciprocate because they are sometimes waiting for people to reach out. That's the one thing I said. Everybody said, I just want someone to make a connection. And, but yeah, you're totally right. But, you know, Punjabis, they come out with advice and they have, like Dr. Mutta was saying, salahan puriyan ji, jinniyan marji, aa karo, ain karo, aa karna chahiਦਾ ਵਾ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਪੜਿਆ ਸੀ ਐ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਵਾ, rather than, you know, just kind of try to be empathetic and connect with you. So I think that is also almost like a skill that we need to learn, how to kind of emotionally connect with people.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਡਾ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਦੀ ਮੈਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹਨਾ ਉਹਦੀ ਆਊਟਕਮ। ਅਸੀਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਪੂਰਾ ਮਹੀਨਾ ਡਿਸਪਲੇ ਲਗਾਇਆ। ਉੱਤੇ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਐਡਿਕਸ਼ਨ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼, ਇੱਕ ਮੇਲ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਫੀਮੇਲ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਵਰਕਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਲੰਗਰ ਹਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀਗੇ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੂਰਾ ਦਿਨ ਸੈਟਰਡੇ, ਪੂਰਾ ਦਿਨ ਸੰਡੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਲਗਾਇਆ, ਪੂਰਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਹੀਨਾ, ਜਾਨੀ 4 ਸੈਟਰਡੇਜ਼ ਐਂਡ 4 ਸੰਡੇਜ਼। ਸਾਡੀ ਹਾਈਪੋਥੇਸਿਸ ਸੀਗੀ ਕਿ ਬਾਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਣਗੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉੱਥੇ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ 'ਚ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਤੇ ਐਡਿਕਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਓ, ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਵਡ ਵਨ ਨੂੰ, ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਕੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੋ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹੈਲਪ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਣਗੇ, ਪਰ ਵੀ ਵਰ ਸਰਪ੍ਰਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਕਿ ਦੀ ਅਮਾਊਂਟ ਆਫ ਪੀਪਲ ਕੇਮ around to ask questions around mental health and addiction was unbelievable. We were so overwhelmed ਕਿ ਉਸ ਇੱਕ ਮਹੀਨੇ 'ਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ 36 referrals ਆਈਆਂ ਉੱਥੋਂ। ਸੋ ਫਿਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਕਿ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ 'ਚ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਫੈਮਿਲੀਅਰਿਟੀ ਆ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ 'ਚ ਫੈਮਿਲੀਅਰਿਟੀ ਆ, ਉੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਗਰ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕਰੀਏ ਤਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਲੋਕ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਐਕਸੈਪਟੈਂਸ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ। ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਹਜੇ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਡਿਟੇਲ 'ਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਪਊਗਾ ਵੀ ਕਿਉਂ। ਕੰਪੈਰੇਟਿਵਲੀ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਟੈਲੀਵਿਜ਼ਨ 'ਤੇ ਕਰੀਏ ਅਨਾਊਂਸ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੀ 9 to 5 ਸਾਡੇ ਜਾਨੀ ਹੈਲਪਲਾਈਨ ਅਵੇਲੇਬਲ ਆ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋਗੇ, ਸਾਡੇ ਕੇਸ ਮੈਨੇਜਰਸ ਰਾਈਟ ਅਵੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨਗੇ, ਉੱਥੇ ਹਜੇ ਲੋਕ ਹਿਚਕਚਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ। ਲੇਕਿਨ ਇਟ ਵਾਜ਼ ਫੈਸੀਨੇਟਿੰਗ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਕੋਈ ਹਿਚਕਚਾਹਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿਖਾਈ, ਨਾਲੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਓਪਨਲੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਯਾਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨੀਂਦ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਔਰ ਸਾਰੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਦੇਰ ਇਜ਼ ਨੋ ਕੌਨਫੀਡੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲਿਟੀ। ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਈਡ ਤੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਆ ਜਾਓ, ਐਂਡ ਦੇ ਵਰਨਟ ਸਕੇਅਰਡ ਐਟ ਆਲ। ਉਹ ਸਾਡਾ ਚਾਚੇ ਦਾ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਯਾਰ, ਉਹ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਹੀ ਬੜੀ ਪੀਂਦਾ, ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਉੱਚੀ ਉੱਚੀ ਲੱਗੇ ਪਏ। ਐਂਡ ਆਮ ਜਸਟ ਵਰੀਡ ਕਿ ਉਦੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਟਿਗਮਾ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਗਿਆ। ਇਫ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਟਾਕਿੰਗ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਸਟਿਗਮਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਟਰੂ ਆ, ਮੈਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਸਟਿਗਮਾ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ, ਪਰ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ 'ਚ ਦੇ ਫੀਲ ਸੋ ਕੰਫਰਟੇਬਲ ਇਨ ਟਰਮਸ ਆਫ ਟਾਕਿੰਗ। And this is something that I wanted to see if Sahayatha can hold a similar kind of, ताकि ਆਪਾਂ correlate ਕਰੀਏ ਵੀ ਵਾਕਿਆ ਹੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹਜੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ 'ਚ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਕਸਪਲੋਰ ਕੀਤਾ। We have to do a number of ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ to just come up with a research study ਕਿ yes, this is where people are looking for some help and we should be perhaps looking a creative way of getting them involved.
Yeah, and Baldev ji, ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਹਿਊਮ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੀ, ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਗਏ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਫਰੀਮਾਰਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਲਸਬਰਾਂਟੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ, ਸਾਨੋਜ਼ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਟੇਬਲ ਲਗਾਏ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਸੇਮ ਰਿਸਪੌਂਸ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ, ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਾਉਣਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਸੇਫ ਸਪੇਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੀ, I can't hold your confidentiality, but there's no concern, they're openly talking about it. And I'm wondering if that's a safe space, it's a community space for them, and that brings that level of safety ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਾਂਤੀ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਹੈ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਆ ਕੇ, and they're in a different space and different place than they are if they walk into our clinics, which we're trying to make them more comfortable, you know, not to look like a doctor's office, right. But it is, right? And when you go into a doctor's office, you're nervous and anxious, and you may not be able to express yourself fully. So you know, the same thing is happening in when we're doing services at the Gurdwara. But I'd love your idea of doing a research project and really, you know, really looking into like what is it that is really informing them to be able to open up like that.
ਹਾਂਜੀ, I think from my perspective ਉਸ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ, ਪਰ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਮੈਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦਾ ਕਿ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਦਾ ਫੋਨ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਜਾਣ ਪਛਾਣ ਬਾਰੇ ਕੰਸਰਨਡ ਹੈਗਾ ਵਾਂ, ਰਾਈਟ, ਤੇ ਲੈ ਦੇ ਕੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹੀ ਬੰਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਅਪਾਇੰਟਮੈਂਟ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਵਾ। ਸੋ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਵਾ ਕਿ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਇਟ ਇਜ਼ ਲੈਸ ਥ੍ਰੈਟਨਿੰਗ ਟੂ ਟਾਕ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਅ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਪਰਸਨ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਮੇਰੇ ਚਾਚੇ ਦਾ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਪੀਂਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਆ ਤੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋ, which is totally fine. I think as long as they are reaching out, ਜੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੋਈ ਕੁਰਸੀ ਢਾ ਕੇ ਬੈਠਾ ਵਾ, it is less steps to get them to ask the question, as opposed to ਤੁਸੀਂ ਟੀਵੀ ਤੇ ਪਾਇਆ, ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਫੋਨ ਕਾਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿਹਨੇ ਚੱਕ ਲੈਣਾ ਵਾ, ਅੱਗੇ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋ ਜਾਣੀ ਹੈ. So I think it opens up a few doors. And I think Samareen has a question that maybe Anika you can ask.
Yeah, sure. So she kind of wanted to talk about the importance of caregivers or having go-to people that can kind of address mental health help and be able to provide that support, I believe. So she was saying if there are belief providers around someone, I think she's kind of talking about how that would affect it. So maybe having those caregivers or go-to people, if that would make an impact. I think that's kind of like that first level that you were talking about, Dr. Sabharwal, in terms of providing care. So if you could expand on that.
Yeah. And maybe I'm interpreting it differently. I felt like maybe she's saying that though, and Samareen, you can speak up, but that it's important for those that are caregivers or go-to people for the community or for a family, that they also need mental health, and it's important for them to reach out for mental health supports as well. And that is so true. We do lots of, you know, we do caregiver burnout workshops, really trying to sit, you know, because we again, you know, Dr. Mutta, Baldev Mutta was talking about the prioritizing our own selves, right? So it's like showing up to appointments, showing up on time, or even wanting to get your own therapy, and reminding folks. And I always use this analogy that when we're on an airplane, they do the safety presentation, they always tell us to put on our masks first and then help our child or others around us. And so it's so important that if we are caregivers, we're a collectivistic community, and so we are all caregivers at some level, that we need to take care of ourselves before we can help support others around us. So it's so important for caregivers and go-to people to get mental health support, because taking care of someone comes with a lot. It's a lot emotionally, it's a lot physically. So yes, it's so important. And I think that's a great, you know, where we're trying to build a list of workshops that the community wants or what's important for our community. I think this is a wonderful topic to add to our list.
There was one comment from the Facebook that women who are trying to seek help, if they inform their in-laws, that even that gets harder. Like, are there any tips and things that we can talk about how to help women who are living in joint families and have to deal with that scenario?
ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਦਾ, ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਡੀਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਵਿਮਨ ਨੂੰ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਡੋਮੈਸਟਿਕ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ, ਔਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਪੇਰੈਂਟ ਯੂਥ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਔਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਅਕਸਰ ਇਹ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੇਫ ਇੰਟਰਵੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਦੱਸਣੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਧੀਆ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੀ ਹਾਂ, ਮੈਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਹੈਲਪ ਲੈਣ ਲਈ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਣਾ ਨਿਆਣਾ ਸੁਣ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਹ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਸ਼ਰਾਰਤੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਟੈਕਨੀਕਸ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੇ ਆਉਣੀਆਂ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਹ ਨੌਨ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਿਵ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਆ ਇਹ ਮੱਚ ਬੈਟਰ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਗਰ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੇ ਓਨੈਸਟਲੀ ਦੱਸ ਵੀ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹਾਂ, ਚਾਂਸਿਸ ਆਰ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਣੀ ਵੀ ਕਿਉਂ ਲੋੜ ਆ ਬਾਹਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ। ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ ਉਦੋਂ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਸਾਰੇ ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਤੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਗ੍ਰੇਡ 12 ਕਰਕੇ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਡਿਗਰੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਚੰਗੇ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਬਣਨਾ। ਸੋ ਉਦੋਂ ਕੁਝ ਵੀ ਐਕਸੈਪਟੇਬਲ ਆ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹੋਗੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਟੀਚਰ ਨੇ ਕਹਿਤਾ ਵੀ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਥੋੜੀ ਜੀ ADHD ਆ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਟੈਸਟ ਕਰਾ ਕੇ ਦੇਖੋ ਵੀ ਵਾਕਿਆ ਹੈਗੀ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ, ਉਹ ਭੱਜ ਕੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਟੈਸਟ ਕਰਾਉਣਗੇ। ਪਰ ਜੇ ਇਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਿਸੇ ਹੋਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਹੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਵੀ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਵੀ ਤੈਨੂੰ ADHD ਆ, ਤੈਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਡਾਇਗਨੋਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਕਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਣਗੇ ਲੈ ਇਹ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਹੀ ਕਮਲਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਪਿਆ ਐਵੇਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ADHD ਕਹੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ। So it's very difficult how our community behaves towards our children and towards everybody. So मेरा ख्याल से ਜਿਹੜੀ recommendation है women वास्ते ਇਹ ਆ, what is the safest alternative? Safest alternative ਆ ਬੱਚੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹੋ ਵੀ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਣ ਚੱਲੀ ਆ and then you go and talk whatever else you want to talk। ਤੇ ਉਦੋਂ ਤੱਕ ਨਾ ਡਿਸਕਲੋਜ਼ ਕਰੋ ਜਦ ਤੱਕ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੇਫ ਹੋ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਡਿਸਕਲੋਜ਼ਰ ਸੇਫ ਆ। ਇਹ ਨਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਿਸਕਲੋਜ਼ ਕਰ ਦੋ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਰੋਕ ਦੇਣ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਖਬਰਦਾਰ ਜੇ ਤੂੰ ਗਈ ਆ, and then it just defeats its purpose, right?
Yes, thank you.
ਹਾਂਜੀ, ਨਹੀਂ such an important point ਹੀ ਆ। ਕਈ ਵਾਰ retaliation ਦਾ ਰਿਸਕ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਵਾ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੀ abuse ਵਾਲੀ situation ਹੈਗੀ ਆ and they really want to keep it private, otherwise the reaction at home is that the abuse worsens ਕਿ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਚੁੱਪ ਕਰਾਓ, right? Yeah. So I think it becomes very important and again I echo, we see it in practice ਕਿ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਬੱਚੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਨੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ, ਸੈਕੰਡ ਥਰਡ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਸੀਗੀ and you wait for that conversation opener ਕਿਉਂਕਿ you want to go there at some point, and that's where confidentiality can be so much helpful ਕਿ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਜੇ family session ਵੀ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਵਾ then you end up just talking briefly about the child ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ no, the family is not ready to engage for the core issue yet. So timing is everything.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the audience for the Facebook Live? I had one more question if you want to go ahead and address it. This is kind of on the basis of, you talked about how a lot of times when people come in for help, it's a bit too late, or they come in extreme circumstances kind of thing. So not too late to say, but in extreme circumstances. So when they really realize that they have an issue. So I know we kind of went over some like 9 symptoms and some kind of areas of signs that someone might need help or might want to go visit someone for help. But when would you recommend someone getting that help? Or what's something, is it just areas of high stress or anxiety, or when would you kind of recommend for someone to come in to get professional help?
I think that the emojis that Dr. Sekhon shared were beautiful because it really described like what does symptomology look like? What does it look like when you're going through a mental health challenge? And so it looks different for everyone. And like, as I had also mentioned that, you may be going through a stressful transition. So I always tell folks, I think everyone should be in therapy. I think everyone should seek out services because we're all going through life transitions, and to do that preventative care so that we don't get to that level of crisis. And so for folks that are not ready, it's usually looking at things like, okay, how long has it been that this person's been feeling this way? And kind of in the field, it's that 2-week marker is like, okay, these symptoms have been occurring for 2 weeks and there hasn't been any change. So that would be one thing to look out for, like how long have these symptoms been happening? What impact has it had on the person's functioning at work, their functioning socially, within relationships? And then also any risk factors. So are they thinking about harming themselves, or have they harmed themselves in any way? and those are the three things that I really want to pay attention is like how long the symptoms, risks, and impacts on their life. And then that's the point where we think, okay, they may need to see someone, a professional.
And I think something to keep in mind that people often underreport symptoms. Again, that, vulnerability and the sense of shame and kind of making it seem like things are not so bad. So I think I would definitely err on the side of caution there. If there is concern, just encourage them to talk to the doctor. Like Dr. Sabharwal was saying, preventative care. So in the minorities, apne kai baar, by the time people seek help, it's already late. Things are already bad because care has been delayed. Aap hi manage kari jande ne. या फैमिलियां भी उदों ही लेके आउंदियां ने कि हुण तां इहनूं महीना हो गया कि ये रूम चों ही नहीं निकलिया, right? And you know that things are almost in a crisis situation. So I would almost err on the side of caution because mental health is still hard to gauge. As soon as they can be evaluated by a professional, and if it is mild, great. The intervention is going to be mild. They're going to be reassured. At least they'll get the education. But if things are kind of on the higher level, then we're not wasting more time.
Okay, well, it seems like we have no other questions on the live or in here. But thank you so much for answering those. So I'm just going to go ahead and give a brief overview of some of the resources that we have provided from this session. So is everyone able to see my screen? Okay, perfect. So here we have this QR code, and here if you scan it, it'll take you straight to the resources page on the Sahayatha website. So we've gone ahead and kind of compiled a list of resources provided by Dr. Sabharwal as well as Dr. Sekhon and Mr. Mutta. So we've gone ahead and put them all together there so that it's kind of an easy, quick point of access. And then also on June 12th, we'll go ahead and begin the rest of the series in convergence with PCHS, as I previously mentioned. So that will be on Facebook Live, and it'll be on June 12th at 11 a.m. So that'll kind of be, I think, the next turning point of the series, and we'll go on from there. But other than that, thank you so much to all of you for sharing. It was very insightful, and I think it really brought kind of a great perspective to have professionals come in and share their opinion as well as like what their experience is, especially as, contributing members of society and what you've seen in your office and through practice, because we've all heard a lot, but we don't always know if the sources are reliable or if we're hearing information that is going to kind of make an impact. And so I think that was really helpful for me, and I'm really grateful for that. So thank you so much for coming in to share today.
Thanks so much for having us. Let's keep up the effort.
Yeah, thank you, Sahayatha, for really, putting importance to mental health and bringing these conversations to the forefront.
Thank you. Appreciate all of your time. Thanks, Anika, for hosting.